Welcome to another Mix and Mash Battle Lounge with the 2MK team. Well, Battle Lounges. Today we are, as always for our Mondays, playing some Street Fighter V and making sure we get that practice. This week we are once again revisiting the concept of various mindsets. It's been a month since we had a quieter stream. This one might be quieter, but there would still be some things that get discussed along the same lines. We begin with a familiar matchup. And I think we came in a little late, so that means this is probably going to zip through the first part. As soon as it does load. Mix and mash means that the team is generally creating their own lounges and we tend to consolidate toward the end. Therefore we'll be drifting around depending on the opponents. And as people assess their own performance. Who exactly you see today is not necessarily clear. We're all going to try to get in today, but you're most likely not going to see any Abigail or Bison or Jury, as their players are not currently available. But you might see some Chun or Colleen today, as technically, as a result, I am available. If you need a little more lock on, you're generally looking for silver lounges. But you should be able to find at least one or two bronze ones from the Cosmic Wolf and eventually Suntier side. They're probably quite large, but that does not mean they're likely to fill up too quickly. As I said, we tend to only consolidate toward the end, and the Wolf just often makes the biggest lounge because that's probably going to happen eventually. You'll get Kansuki Dynasty on the mic a bit later on to talk about certain things. For now, I'm just chilling here too, as I still have to do some coordination of team to make sure everyone is on the same page right now. If you specifically want to face a different member, make sure to search 3 rounds, first to 2, probably with character select on, as today mostly that should be how it goes. On the European side you might get Suntier with character select off. I'll let you know once I know from that side. And of course there will be some talk about bots when it's me on, because we've had quite a bit of bot work recently helping out with stuff in ways that might matter. We haven't heard anything from Capcom regarding the new characters yet, or when any of that will be happening at all. But to be fair, it wasn't specifically said that it was going to be this year or early this year or anything. They might just drop them all 5 at once at some point. I'm sure they're very busy dealing with all of the various Capcom Pro Tour changes and stress that they have to deal with. Especially since it gives them so much clearer netcode data. People have of course not been happy about the fact that netcode can still be imperfect enough to change the outcomes of online tournaments. But at the end of the day, we really aren't likely to have any offline tournaments for a while, so Capcom can actually focus a little more on it. Plus, with offline tournaments, you get much more times for utilizing all that stuff, showing out the hype. But for now, we just basically see things like, okay, we have new costumes. Alright, well, the wolf is probably on a roll, so let's see. This one continue a little bit. Assuming they were even ready. They're ready. We got the Europe side now. This isn't usually that bad in terms of lag, but it can be terrible. We spent some of this weekend watching one of the European tournaments, actually. It was quite good. Kazuki Dynasty may have more to say about it later, at least indirectly. I'm not going to go into it too much now, other than that it was quite good. And if you want to go watch the stream on Capcom Fighters, especially, I think for this year Capcom Fighters streams are free. But they also tend to rerun things because with no other tournaments to play, they'll just take one or two of the most recent tournaments and replay the top 8 because, you know, there's often stuff to learn from those, whether in terms of mindsets of players, which is partially what we'll be tackling today, or things you can do with your character. But so far it looks like we're getting to the point where most of us know what to do with our characters, and it comes down to, okay, have I practiced enough to actually do this? DeWolf has definitely been getting more practice recently, and as a result there's been a relatively large jump in effectiveness in terms of damage output, and in terms of understanding how to get through certain situations without getting stressed. Because it's not necessarily that having more damage is just helpful in that regard, but simply that, oh, I know why I'm failing this. It's easier to get yourself to not do certain things when you're not stressed out about it. I cannot tell how laggy this is, but so far it doesn't look like lag is more the reason why anything in this match is happening or not happening, so I'm not going to worry about it at this point. And if that was a reaction, I therefore doubt there was. It might seem insane for that to be one, but if you train against certain people, or in this case bots, for long enough, I'm not talking about the Akuma because the Akuma might just have an Alex. Alex is a relatively popular character for people to just pick up, apparently. We do see one of DeWolf's executional problems still coming up here, specifically in the form of not always being able to punish things like Tatsus with EX or even light Powerbomb. This is really tight because Powerbomb actually has slightly more startup than most command throws, and a lot of moves fall into that very weird space where you see, sure, 5 frames, no problem, I got something, but you might not be able to get good damage for certain characters without other things. Specifically, I believe this means that for Alex, if you can't do it on reversal timing, even -6 moves will usually cause you to miss, as in you can't grab. The opponent could jump out or use a throw invincible or fully invincible move, so reversal Powerbomb becomes really important for those moves, and is even harder to deal with when you don't remember or if the opponent has changed the frame data of the move by hitting at a perfect spacing. The hard part for that move in particular, though, is that technically, unlike most moves that tend to move forward, which tend to put the opponent really close to you or obviously far enough away that you can't do anything, Tatsu is more of a timing issue. So recognizing the reversal timing required for the Tatsu is somewhat difficult. It was an interesting choice. It therefore does help to do the effectively tick throw, hit the light punch, and then do the power bomb, but this is technically slightly harder execution than the reversal one, because one is timing in terms of response and the other is a little bit rougher, because you're still facing the same problem. You get slightly better options because your move is 2 frames faster, but you haven't really resolved the I don't quite know the timing here problem. There are almost always situations like that in games, where your opponent just gets to do certain moves for free because you have a specific inability, either mental block or difficulty executing certain things. Of course, nothing really solves this other than practice, so practice is what happens. Fortunately, DeWolf is relatively familiar with this matchup, does get some practice at dealing with the Kumas and their spacings and so on. And has basically started today by facing one and then another Akuma. So no heavy stresses in terms of unlocking all that stuff for today yet. Irregular throw is also an option there though, but you're still facing the same problem. If you mistime it, if you mash too much, you still won't necessarily get it. It's a little easier, but then you start to worry about being slightly out of range. Interestingly, light power bomb and regular throw don't have terribly different damage, meaning that the power bomb's stronger option is that your opponent can't tech out of it. It's therefore not specifically necessary to push yourself to do that against the Tatsu. You could just go, well, okay, I'll do the regular throw, since the regular throw should punish this move outright. You don't have to think about, is it working? You could still be off in the timing, but it's much less executionally taxing to do it. Speaking of executionally taxing though, we now have air knee smash and apparently after image. This is something you learn over time, to just get used to the idea that your opponent will jump. But it's hard to let go sometimes of the in-betweens. Every time you do get jumped on successfully, you have to worry about, is it going to happen again? What went wrong with that one? It's hard to just let go and go, no, I'll just wait and then do it again, because whatever. Especially since your opponent could eventually do it so much that they then get to stop jumping. And if you're thinking that you have to play footsies, it gets even harder. One of DeWolf's problems in general in these games is speed related. Specifically, being able to recognize a situation quickly enough to respond to it in that way. It comes up a lot in terms of punishes or, as we keep on discussing, scrambles. But scrambles are obviously hard to train. Part of the reason why it's more important to have bots to use is that training scrambles against the CPU is nearly impossible. Namely because the CPU reads your inputs and always knows what to do to counter your attack. So, against certain characters, actually beating scrambles becomes literally impossible. unfortunately, this is exactly one of those characters against whom you have to be able to do it, and where the computer will absolutely read everything you want to do. Higher familiarity with scrambles can often help out here, but at the end of the day, you still have to practice. And you do have to practice the recognition part, because the entire point of scrambles is that being familiar with them only gives you a certain amount of leeway. It tells you, oh, is this sometimes plus? Is this sometimes minus? And once you've got that information, and it does fall on both sides, you still have to learn to recognize which one. And this is usually quite minor in terms of differences. It comes up often with reset style anti-airs. You see it really well at high level when the specific reset used by the player is almost completely under their control, leading to a true mix-up of the worst kind, let's say. Basically, if you do the seemingly sensible thing, probably you'll be blocking the wrong direction. And all sorts of characters have lots of ways to do this. Players keep on developing more and more of them. They're particularly dangerous when you're low on health and don't really have a lot of wiggle room, because your opponent no longer cares about aiming for the one that does high damage after the reset. They just want to hit you at all. Which brings us to Bison, a character who is phenomenally good at this. Kage is also good at this, but requires a specific V skill. Scrambles can also be created in situations like that. Bison does a move, Bison lands in front of you. In that moment you don't know, should I have reacted? Would I have been hit by the scissor kick if I went forward? If I tried for a move? Would I have traded and I died? What should I have done there? And by the time you've realized that the whole thing has gone on, Bison has recovered, you can't hit him anymore, and he's jabbed you. In this case, twice. Sometimes the mindset of the player fighting tells you more about how they'll react to scrambles, and we've definitely discussed that before on the stream. In fact, it was one of our heavier topics more recently. So while we won't necessarily be going into too much on it again, understand that if you actually care about that, you probably can check one of our more recent streams for that content. There's a lot of stuff that is going on in the mindset of a given player. And because of the way that the psychology of these games work and the stress involved, the player may not be able to do that much about it. In other words, there's the sort of person who almost always uppercuts when scrambling, almost always goes for a throw when scrambling. Enough so that you could basically rely on it to get at least some damage and just ignore the times it doesn't work like that. This is actually one of the things that makes lower level players look less skilled than they often are mentally. The problem coming up that they hit buttons that are even less safe, because having as your scramble reaction hit crouch jab is a different level of getting yourself killed than having your scramble reaction as hit sweep. But honestly, for the player, They learn that sweep works, they learn that sweep knocks you down, it matters enough that you care, and the jab doesn't do much. Sometimes it gets them into worse problems if the opponent is mashing. We all know that Ken. We've seen that Ken. Are we rotating? Hard to say. Looks like we are, at least a little bit. So we're going to give this one more rotation through the group before Kansuki Dynasty also starts getting in on the action probably. This lounge is technically full. That last slot is for people who specifically request the invite. You'll have to let us know via stream chat or something if you need that invite. And it may be used to help us fill out the team members later. But we've now got Fang versus Ryu. Neither character specifically causes a lot of scrambles, thankfully. So it looks like we'll probably get something different to talk about. Their potential for scrambles comes more so in terms of their reach and certain mix-ups. They both have just enough reach to make the opponent second guess themselves, but it's not really that a scramble is happening, it's more so a misjudgment. Similar to thinking that you should go for this and your opponent just jumps from what seems like too far away, or jumps from a range that looks like it should cross up but doesn't. Those are not usually a scramble is happening situations. Those are, you are not quite familiar enough, or they've somehow tricked you with their hitboxes or hurtboxes by either moving slightly backward, crouching, causing some other movement in their character. Wiggling matters a lot, especially at higher level, because movement is more stressful than no movement for most people. Knowing when you shouldn't wiggle as a player has a lot to do with understanding how intimidated your opponent is and your own mindset, which is again our focus today. Some people just play better when they don't bother trying to intimidate the opponent with their wiggling. In certain matchups, this is completely fine. There's just some matchups where the player who is trying to get in doesn't benefit from wiggling around. And there are a couple where characters like Abigail, for example, can just stand there and be a giant wall against certain other characters without ever indicating that they care. They can just often just crouch block. You will see at high level quite often Abigail just crouch blocking for like 10 to 20 seconds at a time because what's the opponent going to do about it? This is of course matchup dependent. We've got a lot of good movement today, with the main issue being exactly what I mentioned before. It's really hard at the range where Ryu and Fang often fight to tell if they're going to cross each other up or not. And if you're used to other characters, you're often surprised by the fact that they don't. Fang's jumps definitely look as if they should in certain situations, and Ryu's definitely look like they should in certain situations, and neither one tends to actually happen in those situations. It happens more often when the opponent actually hits a button which changes their hurtbox. You can train this sort of thing on both our Sagat bot and Colleen bot, especially if you've bought CE. If you want to train it and for some reason haven't bought the Championship Edition, it's a little bit harder to do, but you can try on Ed. You should probably have enough like fight money to buy someone, and you're more likely to have bought Ed than most people. I don't think we have any easy to input bots that just let you do cross-ups them from the beginning though. because the ability to test your cross-ups has to do with checking an enemy who moves in particular spaces. Doesn't come up a whole lot. One useful thing though is to note that even though a scramble may not be real, you can still get a lot of information about your opponent's mindset from how they react to it, regardless of the fact that it wasn't really a scramble. Often this means they get hit, but it tells you stuff about the other timings. So far, we know that in timings the wolf normally hits, in scramble timings the wolf normally just hits crouch medium punch, and this Ryu so far tends to ES uppercut. Therefore, from both their sides, the proper response most likely is that the Ryu player, if they have control of a scramble, should just parry, because what's Alex going to do about it at the ranges that they end up at? Probably nothing. Alex also has crush counters that take too long. Even with Ryu's relatively long recovery on parry, we've always advocated that Alex's moves are just too long for most people to react and actually get the crush counter in a way that matters. So it'd be good to parry. In any case where Alex isn't close, you get free damage off of the parried scramble options. And the wolf in most scramble situations should probably just block, because it's more likely that their opponent will do an uppercut of some kind. For example, I'm willing to bet that that crouch heavy punch just now was in fact also an uppercut that just got messed up because of the reset. Barely over.
Round 2. Fight.
We're definitely seeing some very focused Ryu play here. But they're also slightly susceptible to walking forward, because Ryu Bot will easily teach you how to deal with most of this. Not because this player is particularly predictable, but because Ryu really doesn't have that many options for whether or not he's likely to cross you up. He's not that type of tricky as a character for the most part. It's more so your own character's ability or lack thereof that causes that to happen.
Ryu wins.
But changing one's mindset to the point of, okay, I am now able to make sure I block in these situations, and I know how to get through all this while being stressed by the fireballs and all that, is a thing you train over time, usually for a long time. So for now, we're mostly going to watch for that moment of the crouch medium punch. Not necessarily because it's unlikely to be successful, but because, again, it tells us things about mindsets and situations. Against very high-level players, that sort of thing telegraphs to them what style of player you are and where they can look for damage opportunities, even if it doesn't actually have anything to do with the medium punch itself. Because it can, at least against certain players, telegraph your mindset to them. And any telegraphing of your current mindset is usually a problem. because you sometimes need to be able to change your mindset without your opponent noticing in order to get a big damage or conversion. There's a good example. The Ryu player could probably safely forward jump after nearly every crouch medium punch. Not because this is an entirely safe thing to do, but because in this case you're not probably assuming this is a setup. You've seen enough stray crouch medium punches to go, okay, this is not you trying to get me to jump. This is just the button you hit here, which probably means that you're hoping it hits me. And therefore possibly less focused on the anti-air, or even on blocking. And therefore the cross-up is possible. That sort of thing. And there's the scramble. So it could have been one on the block, but as I said, keeping track of all that, you practice to keep track of all that. Good opening gambit bait. But these little things are how you get to the point of feeling like a player, especially a high-level player, has just dismantled your game plan. They're not necessarily dismantling your plan, they're looking for that moment, your tendency. And once they've realized the tendency, they'll find a way to take advantage of it, moving you around based on that tendency. Well, we cancel. But the big push.
Ryu wins.
Transforming your mindset toward that of matching your opponent can be easy, but the stress will often cause you to revert. Doof generally specializes in this, and when it works, can really pick people apart. But remembering very small scrambly interactions blocked precisely here for this long can be rough.
Let's do this.
We now have one more slot open. Are about half an hour into our stream. And are probably going to get serious in the sense of players pushing on each other's tendencies and weaknesses more because everyone's had time to settle into the lounge, and I believe everyone currently in the lounge has gotten to see everyone else play. Tendencies carry over between characters. In fact, sometimes, depending on your skills in the game or the type of characters you play, they carry over really directly, and players can take advantage of that. So for example, we have an idea of how our currently Akuma plays. We're going to see more air stuff than you might expect from the standard Akuma, because they enjoy the sort of thing that involves like Kage's Misogi and Head Stomp. Akuma has less of these options and is not as likely to use them against Ryu or characters who can easily do uppercuts. So I'm not guaranteed to see that, but I would definitely expect that after a little while, that's the sort of thing. There's we go. That was the perfect example of that situation. Demon Flip, because that's, I like doing this sort of thing and people don't often expect it. And on the other side, ES Uppercut, because that's what I do in this situation.
Round two. Fight.
There's a Demon Flip again. Because this spacing is so difficult for Akuma to deal with, it's probably going to require some backdashes. Whether or not we actually get them, different question. Looks like they also have mild execution issues with the quarter circle backward, because you can tell Tatsu is usually being aimed at here. And as you'd expect from a Bison / Kage player, little more likely to do the air-to-air than the actual uppercut. Despite Kage having this, Kage is relatively recent, so probably not so much. But ready on that Tatsu almost 100% of the time. Can you even hit this person with fireballs? There's the backdash. So this could be in itself a transformation. No, you can't hit this person with fireballs. But the cost of that is probably be having trouble with certain parts of the jump. Repositioning is good. There's the Demon Flip. And yes, noting, yes, you do this. I know how you go. So I'm going to do this part. Air Fireball, and there we go. The breakdown of this sort of experience is part of the fun for at least a certain type of player. Hi. But for everyone else, it can just be stressful because someone is then able to tell you, well, you did this wrong and this wrong and this wrong and this, and it's rattle off this long list. But the thing that's being told to you is not specifically, you need to get better at all of these things. It is technically more so, you're not watching the correct part of the match sometimes. And whether or not you can watch it in total isn't really the point. Being able to go, this person has played Kage and spammed Misogi, and I think it's fair to call it spammed Misogi. No disrespect, but I'm gonna go with spammed. And used head stomp and EX head stomp at situations where a player would probably have been able to counter them, but they just felt like doing that anyway. Tatsu. There's no way out of this for the Akuma, so that probably was getting twitchy. Ryu's very high meter makes it very difficult for Akuma to get out of this neutral situation. So technically, again on the high analysis level, Ryu had won before doing anything. Because Akuma can't attack with this form. This style of Akuma, this transformation of Akuma, can't attack a full meter Ryu without worrying about being destroyed. Because there is a timing at which the super will cause a loss from the Demon Flip. Or this, you know, stuff in general. But, thankfully, Akuma has a lot of active frames on that move. Was that planned? Who knows? Based on the mini teabag at the beginning, I'm gonna go it was planned, and they probably deserve to teabag a little bit. That said, that's not necessarily going to be enough, as we still know two things. Our Ryu can jump basically as much as they want, unless they... because the air-to-air is not going to get them killed. And their main goal here should be gaining enough meter to live through whatever Akuma does. Unfortunately, I think that was a drop, and that's probably going to be not necessarily the end, but because the situation hasn't led to Ryu having enough meter to set up what he needs to win, it's going to be defense from here, which is not necessarily going to work. But now, I'm handing this off, because that covers all of the different people in the lounge and their various weaknesses and tendencies. So, let's go to the Kanzuki.
Hello! Ooh, 2 free spaces. So if you want to join and take advantage of any of these players' weaknesses, come search us out. Or, you know, alternately have them take advantage of your weaknesses so you can help work them out.
Karin Kanzuki. Akuma. Yominichiri.
I'll show you the divide in our class.
Round one. Fight. Round two. Fight. You win. Round one. Fight. Round two. Fight.
Alright, well...
Round two. Fight. You win.
Alright then. That is actually a relatively good example of what I was thinking about for myself as well. Relative to the things that Rillian was talking about already. When you're thinking about your mindsets, your opponent's mindsets, and basically what form you're in, or like what state you are set up for, it's often a matter of like the set of defaults that you have is based on your current mindset. If you're in the mindset to chase your opponent when they run away, like I was there for a bit, or if you're in the mindset of, alright, fine, I'll give them some time. They're not necessarily threatening me here, I can handle this, and I'll be patient. Those are two relatively very different emotion sets, different sets of feelings, different, really even sets of instincts that come along with it, just based on changing the mindset you're approaching the game with. And that transformation can have a large impact that I sort of actually just showed off. I have a bit of a tendency to chase opponents, but I do have the ability to not be in that mindset, and when I manage to finish the switch, it has a rather large impact. More of that later, since I am playing right now and not so great at talking while I do so. As you can see from my play, however, I have not quite fully cleared out that mindset and switched over to the other one, or perhaps partially that fighting Dewolf has put me back into that mindset a little bit. Although I can tell you from being able to see my own internal mindset and my thought processes and feelings that it is more the first one than the second. And knowing how to make that sort of transformation, make it totally, rather than like sort of almost getting there but not quite and slipping back, can have a massive impact on one's ability to play the game or take advantage of situations, opponents, or understanding that you can manage to come across as to what works and what doesn't for your particular situation.
Round 2. Fight.
Recognizing what mindset you need, what mindset your opponent is in, and perhaps even more importantly, what triggers you in or your opponent into certain mindsets is extremely important. For instance, I have recognized that DeWolf is in a specific mindset here where he has not once used his air knee smash, or not his air knee smash, his head crush and such things. I've mentioned it now, and he does listen, so that might change. But this is useful information because it means that there's a whole vector I don't have to worry about, and I can have less on my stack. In fact, I think that was the first jump as well. But this information is only as useful as you can put it to use. And in my case, I could see that that was the case, but I sort of couldn't convince myself, or couldn't get myself to switch forms, or to make that transformation. So you saw me still jumping, expecting the air-to-air, or expecting him to move in certain ways, as a twitch that I sometimes, well, often have against a wolf.
Let's do this.
But I was also able to recognize that I was not going to end up doing that shift myself, just straight up, because I knew that it wasn't going to happen in that time frame, in that situation, whatever the case may be. And so that didn't actually have a whole lot of meaning directly, but being aware of that sort of thing, oh, Guile now. Alright, translating. Got it. Being aware of that sort of thing can help you not get too stressed out about things, not get pressure piled onto you. And just handle things better and make it a little less stressful overall, or at least give you something to look for. Well, okay, what do I need to get into the form that I need to be in? How do I make this transformation?
Round 1. Fight. Round one. Fight. Round two. Fight.
I will admit I did not necessarily expect that to work. But I was at chip range, so there was no getting out of it.
Round one. Fight. Round two. Fight.
Alright then.
Final round. Fight.
It's easy to think of these forms in a way as, well, a lot of things. Sets of instincts, sets of... Fundamentally, they're different mindsets, and in different mindsets you're focusing on different parts of your skill sets, different parts of your game, or what you're trying to... You have a different concept of what you're trying to do, or what you want to do, and you often have a different set of weaknesses as a result. And while it is impossible to have no weaknesses, it is sometimes possible to, by changing to a different mindset, having a different set of strengths and weaknesses, even within your main overarching style, than you would in a different state. And so, being able to be aware of these different forms, mindsets, whatever you want to call them, that you have just as a general matter is relatively important, because then you have the ability to choose between them based on the situation. And that is sometimes a matter of analysis, or figuring out what your opponent is doing, obviously experience as well. And when you realize what the one you need is, which one takes advantage of your opponent's weaknesses, or eliminates the weakness that your opponent is currently taking advantage of in yourself, it can be very effective. However, it can also be somewhat difficult, as I possibly illustrated a little bit in my last match, to have necessarily a clear idea of what form or mindset it is that you need for a given situation. If you have a coach or analyst of some kind that knows you well, knows your mindsets, you've worked with them for a while, they may be able to tell you from looking through your opponent. Otherwise, it can just be a matter of experience and time. Tournaments, this is not necessarily the best thing, because time is not a luxury we have in a first to two often. But in a battle lounge like this, you know your turn is going to come up again. You'll probably be okay. Sometimes you figure out quickly, sometimes it can go for basically the whole time without you realizing it, even if you know what you... even if you have it, and it's obvious in retrospect or things like that. Sometimes you're just not there at the moment. Reviewing matches helps with this, of course, but reviewing matches with this in mind can help you learn to recognize situations and what is required the next time various things come up.
Final round. Fight. You win. Round one. Fight. Fight. You win.
Of course, there are some complications in all steps of this, really, and it's something that requires a lot of practice. Being able to remain calm enough to figure out what your current mindset is, what the perhaps weaknesses or strengths of it relative to who you're fighting are, or to just figure out what the one is that you need for a given situation, or sometimes even what the situation is can require a lot of calm or focus, and that can take time to build up. But if you do have a bit of free mental space, the calm to look at this, it can be a very useful tool. Especially if you're in the middle of a match and you recognize that your opponent has changed their own mindset in some particular way. The ability to instantly know what you need and choose to shift to it can be, well, devastating. It's a form of adaptation, really, fundamentally.
Round one. Fight.
demonstration of such a transformation.
Final round. Fight.
I changed a specific aspect of my intent. I'm not doing it perfectly, but nonetheless, it seems to be helping, and this changes my focus and therefore skill set. DeWolf in turn was forced to adjust, and when I observed that he did, it didn't really necessarily change much, or try and transform as a result, but I knew what opening was created by it.
Round one. Fight.
I'll admit that you have some skill.
Round two. Fight. You win. It's go time.
Alright, I'm going to take a little bit of break from actually playing, and let us get a few more matches of various types. One thing I've demonstrated there, although it is not something that would necessarily be very obvious directly, is that
It's go time.
it's not necessarily very easy to pull it off directly. I'll give it one more spin, see what happens here. Alright, there we go, we got some matches. So as I was saying, the thing that I was demonstrating, which was very not obvious actually, is that it can be somewhat difficult to actually get this whole transforming thing to work out directly unless you have the right perspective on how to do it. I got myself in a position in that match where I knew what the correct state to be in was, the correct mindset I needed to hold, and I could mimic it. But I didn't manage to shift to that mindset fully. And so it resulted in me slipping relatively frequently. And you probably saw some of that as we went on, and I tried to do certain things that were not necessarily the best idea. However, these things happen when one sort of half-asses a transformation, I guess you could say. When you are clear on different mindsets you have available, have practiced, are used to, you develop the ability to, with some practice, switch between them. But one of the most important things of switching between mindsets in that way, and something that I have actually personally had a lot of trouble with for a very long time, is that it is necessary to not just go, oh, okay, this is what I need, I'm going to do more of this. It's not so much that you're trying to do a certain thing or, like, adjust yourself a little bit in a certain direction, which is actually something that is easy to do if you're trying to not have weaknesses rather than trying to choose your weaknesses or strengths. And the most effective thing to do is actually to, well, transform. To let go completely of your previous mindset and shift yourself to the new one. Sometimes this will be easier or harder depending on your experience with the mindset that you're trying to get to, and just basically how clear it is, or how complete it is, perhaps, and how comfortable and used to you are with it. The other thing, obviously, that can make it difficult to change from one mindset to another, to make that transformation in your mental state, is if you're too stressed in particular ways. I have often personally found that when I let myself get pushed partway out of a mindset, or my opponent manages to push me really hard in a certain way, and I let go of the mindset or state that I am currently using, that I practice, that I'm accustomed to, and I'm trying to stretch or push to do or be more of something, that this makes it hard to let go, and hard to even stay where I intended to be or where I was, because it sort of scrambles me. Instead of being able to go, okay, this isn't what I need here, I see what I should change to, or simply, I have an idea of what I want to try, actually, because this isn't working. And it's very important to be able to do that specifically, to take the mindset they're trying to go into and just decide to change completely. Discard what you were at before, and effectively start over fresh. Because if you are changing into a new mindset, but you end up trying to hold on to pieces of that other mindset, you're going to end up with a scrambled, jumbled mix and not get the real benefits of either. Anyway, it appears that I'm up again, and so this lounge has come down a little bit, and it might be time for me to search out a new one. We'll see in a minute or two based on whether anyone joins, how things shift around. I do get to fight DeWolf relatively frequently, as it is. And Mix and Mash is all about getting the new experiences and broader set of, well, experience. So for now, hello again, DeWolf.
Round one. Fight.
Alright, that's a hint as to what mindset he is in. Both what things I need to worry about and what things I do not need to worry about. Knowing how long your opponent is likely to or tends to stay in a particular mindset is also very helpful, because you know when the things that you are doing or the mindset that you yourself are in are going to stop working. And possibly have some idea of what to do next. Or what not to.
You win. Round one. Fight.
you could use more training.
Final round. Fight! You lose. Round one. Fight!
Looks like you could use more training.
Round two. Fight!
I'll admit that you have some skill.
Final round. Fight! Let's do this.
Alright then. Now we have something else that we can have a look at here. If that did not pan out, we were going to head over to another team member's lounge, possibly Cosmic Wolf in this case. But we have a little new blood, so there is a little more to see. And who knows, maybe there will be yet another join. And Kage.
Round one. Fight. Round two. Fight.
One other, possibly final thing about the sort of transformation of mindsets that we've been talking about on the stream is that it's important to remember, and this can be difficult sometimes in the heat of the moment or when there's just that one thing you can't stop. It's important to remember that it's not about what you are doing most of the time. In fact, basically never. It is about the mindset that you are in. What you tend to do or how you react to various situations is a consequence of this naturally. But if you go, oh, okay, this is the thing I need to do to beat this. It's important to remember that if you intend to change mindsets to handle that sort of thing, that you make sure it is not so much, oh, I need to do this thing necessarily, but, oh, here's the mindset in which I naturally automatically do this thing. Not necessarily even because it's wrong to just say, okay, I'm doing well, I just need to add this piece. But because the whole point of changing your mindset, changing what form or shape you're in at the moment, is to say, alright, I am going to be the version or subset of my style that where I automatically do the right thing in the right timing for a particular set of right thing and right timing that you're thinking of. And the reason this is important actually is because while the whole lost my train of thought. Well, it'll come back to me. Yes. The reason this is important is because while the whole doing the right thing at the right place or in the right timing, or whatever the case may be, is important, it is even more important that you not necessarily do just that, but that you get yourself into a position where it comes naturally to you. Because in the end, fighting games have a lot of stress management and focus management in them. If you are adding a thing to your mental stack, if you're saying, alright, I will do everything I was doing before and I will also pay attention to this extra thing, it can benefit your opponent in certain ways. Not even because you won't do the thing, but because you'll end up slipping somewhere. If there's a bunch of different things that you're trying to hold on to and keep track of, you just won't have the mental focus for it, or the more pressure they place on you, the harder and harder it will be to hold on to all the pieces. Whereas if you've trained on various different mindsets you can use, if there's like a mindset that you've trained on fighting in, you like have the muscle memory for, you have the bit of experience for, that you can identify and switch to, where that is the thing that you just do automatically, and the other pieces you just do automatically, then you're not going to have that same stress buildup. And while you may have another weakness, it could easily be that you're going to effectively have like one thing to track now, or two things to track now, instead of whatever the whole set that you had before was, and then this other thing. Basically making sure you have the shortest pile, or smallest pile, of things you have to focus on possible. Anyway, that is all from me, I think, and the lounge is sort of starting to wind down, so we probably will not be going on much longer. Maybe another match or two with a Days 213, or possibly anyone else who joins, and then we will be signing out for the evening. The lounge may continue, although if it peters out this evening, then there won't be much to do. So you can look for that if you're still interested. Ooh, this will be interesting. And otherwise, look for our next stream. Oh, this is good.
one. Fight. Round two. Fight. You lose. Round one. Fight. Round two. Fight. You lose.
Alright then. As I was saying, that is about all that I have to say directly. So you can stop by for our next stream of Street Fighter, the same Monday at about 7 p.m. US Eastern Standard Time, or you can check our Twitter @MK_FGC to find out more about that, what we might be talking about, just confirmation that we're starting, or whatever it is that we happen to be up to, either on Mondays or throughout the week in other games. We are having often our Dead or Alive 6 Battle Lounge, and so you can look for that as well on Thursdays at the same 2_MK_FGC Twitter, or just here on our Twitch stream if you are interested in such things. Otherwise, we will be signing off shortly, possibly after this match or the next one. And so, have a nice day, I guess. And try to pay attention to opportunities to develop or train on different mindsets, and having that sort of bank available to yourself, learning when to recognize which one you need for particular situations, opponents, opposing styles, and especially when it changes, so that you can be ready to transform yourself. It can be a very useful ability once one has developed it, but like everything, it requires a lot of practice and a careful attention to build up the skills.
Round two. Fight. Zeku wins. Round one.